On to our big spotlight then for this evening. The real negotiations have begun in Paris, and we will know in less than a week whether the world leaders are able to come up with an agreement to save the planet. But the issues that are stumbling blocks are well known. While every country is pressing for a resolution, there are a few bottlenecks over the form and the final shape the agreement will take. Remember, our Prime Minister Narendra Modi called for global climate justice ahead of the Paris talks and argued for a common but differentiated framework that takes into account the historical trajectory of the carbon emissions from the Industrial Revolution. A lot is at stake. We are now joined by the Environment and Forest Secretary in the Government of India and one of India's chief negotiators, Ashok Lavasa, who is in Paris right now, and he is hopping between meetings. Thank you so very much, sir, for taking time out and joining us on this special program. Sir, we've seen earlier today the first draft of the climate accord has come out, has been released, and in that it appears that some of the concerns that India had voiced have been taken into account. Your first reaction, sir?
Well, the draft has come out, as you said, and as we speak, the draft is being discussed in the negotiating room. The negotiators are there. As you very rightly said, that some of the concerns which India had tabled, they are included in the draft, and we are pursuing them.
Right, sir. So India has made its stand very clear, and we will take some of them, in just a moment. But we've seen even before the Paris climate talks began a bit of sort of the clear differences between the developing countries stand and the developed countries stand as far as the US is concerned. Very clear. John Kerry had made a statement, after which, sir, your minister reacted very strongly. Sir, especially on the fundamental issues of equity, common but differentiated principles, are you hopeful, sir, that some of these concerns will be met in the final agreement?
Well, we continue to be hopeful, and the point that India and the developing countries have been making is that the Paris Agreement should be negotiated within the boundaries of the UNFCCC Convention principles, and those principles, as you mentioned, are well-known. Common but differentiated responsibility is one of the key principles which India has been emphasizing upon.
So, earlier this week when China and the US came together and they sort of, made a pledge to bring down the carbon footprint, and in fact, earlier this year, China had also, sort of indicated that they will bring down their overall carbon emissions starting 2030, but they said that they will try to bring it forward to 2025. So did that put a lot of pressure then on India?
No, I don't think there is any pressure which any country has put on India or can put on India. We, in the spirit of global cooperation, we formulated our INDCs, and our INDCs, which were submitted to the UNFCCC, they have been very well received. India is one of the only countries which has given very comprehensive INDCs. Those INDCs incorporate not only our commitment to reducing the emission intensity of our GDP growth, but it also marks a clear statement of India's willingness and shift to utilizing non-fossil based sources for meeting our energy requirement. India has presented one of the most ambitious, one of the most aggressive, and one of the most well-received plans on incorporating renewables into our electricity system. And therefore, the plan which, therefore the INDC says that we will install electricity capacity, generation capacity, 40% of which will be based on renewable sources. Not only this, we have highlighted the effort that Government of India and the state governments together will make in adding to the carbon sink to the extent 2.5 to 3 billion tons. That is the kind of INDC which few other countries have submitted.
Right.
Let me not overlook. Let me not overlook the importance of the adaptation initiative, which has been highlighted in our INDC, and the focus that we have made on improving lifestyle.
Right, sir, and absolutely. And I think, we must congratulate, the Indian government for coming out with very bold and ambitious targets. In fact, not just India, sir, you would have noticed even Brazil and South Africa have submitted some very ambitious targets. And therein, sir, lies my next question, because there's a feeling that while the emerging countries have indeed come up, with a very clear blueprint as far as their own commitment to the climate change debate is concerned, there seems to be a bit of disappointment as far as, the commitments put forth by the developed world. I mean, what's your view on that, sir?
Well, the citizen report very clearly brings out that there is an ambition gap. The study which was carried out by a few NGOs, I think about 16 of them together, they have even gone to the extent of saying that the developing countries have taken more than a fair share of the burden, and the developed countries need to do a lot more. Also, if you look at the pre-2020 action, there are countries which have not fulfilled their commitments made in the Kyoto Protocol. There are countries which have walked out of the Kyoto Protocol. There are countries which have not ratified the Kyoto Protocol. So if climate action has to be meaningful, and if we are dealing with an emergency, then there is a case for everybody to take urgent, immediate, and ambitious action.
Right. In fact, sir, just a few days ago, the developing bloc, G77 plus China, had come up with some sharp criticism on the alleged attempt made by the developed countries to amend the UN Framework Convention as far as, where financing would be tied to a new mechanism. And that sort of created a bit of confusion. And we saw a very strong statement from G77 on that. Is there an increasingly, sir, a trust deficit that you're sort of you're feeling over there?
Well, the kind of proposals which are on the table, some of them do indicate that there is a certain attempt to redefine some of the basic principles. And that is as India has consistently argued that the principle of common but differentiated responsibility arises from the historic responsibility which developed countries have. And therefore, the fact of historic responsibility is something that cannot be rewritten. That's right. Something which is well known, that has been established not by India or by any developing country. It has been established by the scientific community, by the experts, many of whom or most of whom belong to the developed countries. So their obligation arises from this historic responsibility, and our insistence has been that countries must fulfill the obligation which they had undertaken in the past.
Right. In fact, sir, yesterday Oxfam had come out with a report which clearly sort of vindicated India's position all this while, which they sort of brought out the carbon inequality that there is in the world, and the difference between India and some of the other OPEC countries is striking. Did you get a chance to see that report, sir?
Well, I've not seen that report, but certainly the figures are out there for everybody to see that between the time when the convention was finalized and 2012, which is the beginning of the second Kyoto Protocol period, most of the developed countries, except a few in Europe, have actually consumed more coal than what they did in 1990. So it is not as if that the consumption of coal has been drastically brought down by the developed world. So India has been saying that the fundamental proposition before India is how to meet the development aspirations of its people, how to provide electricity to 300 million people who are without electricity. So that development imperative is primary for the nation, but we are committed that we will pursue the development agenda in such a way that we can minimize the carbon footprint and we don't repeat the kind of mistakes which other countries had made in the past.
Absolutely, sir. One final question, sir, from my side. India has laid out an ambitious plan as far as its renewable energy plans are concerned going forward. To meet that target, sir, by 2022, 175 gigabyte, how important will international finance and funding be, sir?
It is extremely important. Not only finance, which should come from international agencies, which should come from multilateral agencies, which should come from the private sector. But equally important will be the technology, the new technologies which will come about, the existing technologies which will be transferred, because without a meaningful technology which enables storage and management of renewable energy cannot become a reliable part of our electricity grid. And therefore, if it has to be a reliable component of our electricity needs, then new technologies will have to come, and these technologies can come from anywhere in the world, because technology like finance is an important means of implementation.
Absolutely, sir. We know that you have a long day, a long week, in fact, ahead of you. We're going to let you go, sir. And really, I mean, here's wishing you all the luck as you sort of negotiate on behalf of India. We are confident that eventually the agreement that you agree on will be overall good for the country. Thank you so much, Mr. Lavasa, for joining us from Paris.
Regen Powertech presents Climate Business.